At her sister's wedding, the room froze mid-laughter when a high-ranking Navy admiral strode past the bride and groom and saluted her. Moments earlier, her own father had turned her into the punchline of his toast. What happened next flipped every smug smile in that ballroom. What would you have done in her place? Share your thoughts below. I arrived in Newport in a navy blue dress deep enough to fade into the reception crowd, different enough not to be mistaken for the waitstaff. Here alone, Clara Cousin asked, eyes already gleaming for the wrong answer. The terrace smelled of salt and Prosecco. A jazz trio brushed the air with brass and hush. Sunset slid across the balustrade and found every champagne bubble making the whole crowd shimmer as if they'd rehearsed it. I smiled the way I've learned to neutral, courteous, impossible to hook, and let the cousin's curiosity drift off like confetti on wind. Inside my clutch card, stock rasped my knuckles a folded place card that didn't belong to me. Reserved. Honored guest. A printer's flourish, a mistake tucked into my envelope by some harried coordinator. I slipped it back the edges, biting my palm just enough to remind me it was there. Small talk approached in waves. Still freelancing from an aunt with pearls like moonstones. What are you up to these days, from a college friend who couldn't remember my major but remembered my last breakup. Each question wore a smile that never reached the eyes. I cataloged them the way I catalog lines of bearing and wind direction, speed, probable return. Michael crossed the terrace with that quiet poise certain officers carry even out of uniform. He greeted me warmly, then moved on careful as if something had just clicked, but he couldn't place the source. Last week on the phone, he'd said he hoped Newport would be the right roll call. I'd laughed then. Now in the music and the sea light, the phrase felt like a breadcrumb. Inside the ballroom gleamed glass walls, white linen chandeliers dripping light like melting ice. When I found my name card, it sat at a table near the kitchen doors in the draft where servers ghosted through with trays. Emily floated over bright as a marquee. "We tucked you here to keep you out of the harsh lighting," she said, squeezing my arm. "You always prefer quiet." Her eyes flicked to the dance floor where the photographer hovered. I thanked her and smiled. When a bridesmaid passed with a tin of extra cards and a crisis about napkin folds, I offered to help. In the shuffle, I traded the door draft seat for one a little less invisible and tucked the honored guest card deeper into my clutch, letting its weight become mine. Mark Alvarez materialized near the floral's dark suit short haircut that never quite grows out of regulations. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. His gaze dropped to the tiny lapel pin fixed to my clutch, silver and unobtrusive unless you knew what you were looking at. His chin dipped once. My phone vibrated, ETA, ping 100. No sender listed, only the 3 characters and the quiet hum of a plan aligning with time. At the bar, Dad held court, warm handshakes, louder laugh. He'd stacked pride like chips for Emily's career, for Michael's commission, for the business partners who flew in on short notice. When I joined the edge of the circle, he greeted me with a glance and a practiced squeeze on the shoulder, then turned back to a story about a quarterly win that had nothing to do with me. That, too, I filed away. The ocean ticked against the shore. The band shifted to something that wanted you to sway without noticing. Plate after plate sailed. Between courses, the photographer hunted reaction shots, and I fed him angles he couldn't use. Chin, set eyes, level smile that gave away nothing. The mistake card warmed against my skin like a coin. I could have corrected the record a dozen times. I could have said, "Actually, my hours aren't empty. My days aren't for sale. My life isn't waiting for a rescuer." But they were so sure of the story they'd written for me, and I have learned the cost of arguing with a script someone loves. I let their lines pile up. Let the room write itself into a corner. I decided not to correct anyone tonight. Let them talk. I'll let the truth land when it's ready. Out on the floor, the MC lifted a hand for attention. Dad's jaw tipped with anticipation. He loved microphones the way some men love mirrors. Silver flashed as he raised his knife and tapped the rim of his glass. Richard taps his knife to the glass. "I've got a speech you'll all enjoy." Every head turns toward him. And here's Claire, my eldest. Still hasn't found her place in life. Richard's laugh fizzed like champagne, thin and sharp. The camera caught my eyes, cold, unblinking. Glass threw light everywhere, chandeliers dripping it in strands while the band slid from jazz into swing. The MC grinned beside my father, offering him the floor as if it had always belonged to him. He basked in it, basked in the easy laughter that followed, then kept going, small anecdotes polished until they cut. A few guests snorted. Others studied their napkins. I let the silence inside me widen weather-tight. My fingers brushed the honored guest card in my clutch. Paper against skin, a reminder to wait. Richard raised the glass again. Maybe tonight she'll meet someone generous enough to keep her afloat. The camera operator hunting reactions framed me tight. I lifted my chin half a degree and said evenly, "Thanks for caring about my future dad." The room's chuckle flattened into a cough. He drifted table to table, hand on a shoulder, private asides, pitch just loud enough. "She's probably applying at Starbucks." He told an uncle the word probably stretched like gum. Close by, an aunt added, "At least it's an honest living." I stood within earshot as if I'd wandered there by accident, cataloging tone, cadence faces that turned away when I looked at them. At another table, Mark's phone glowed briefly beneath the linen, his expression unreadable. When the best man took the mic, he cracked guest lists longer than a Navy roster, and the word roll call resurfaced like a buoy in rough water. Applause, tinkling glass, another joke. Emily crossed to me, bouquet perfume trailing. "Dad only teases because he loves you," she said. Smile, soft eyes bright. "Maybe one day you'll find your platoon." The pause was deliberate sugar dusted over steel. I said I already serve in one and watched her blink smile fixed like a brooch. Richard, delighted with his own momentum, wound back for another pass this time about how some people prefer to keep their schedules wide open. Laughter again, a shade thinner. The bandleader looked to the MC. The MC looked to Michael. Michael's gaze flicked to me and stayed a fraction too long. The night had shifted by a degree only I seemed to notice. My phone buzzes again. ETA confirmed. 21:0. Formal. I glance up. Michael is watching me now, realization dawning. At exactly 21:0, the ballroom doors swung open. Gold buttons caught the light. The air changed pressure like before a storm. The man at the front stopped before me, hand to brim, "Ma'am." Music sheared off mid-phrase. Bows lifted from strings as if a conductor had sliced the air. The ocean's hush pressed through the glass walls, a second heartbeat under the room's collective inhale. I rose unhurried. The silver pin on my clutch aligned with the insignia on his shoulder, same geometry. Same quiet language confirmation that the breadcrumb trail had led exactly here. They came in two files' shoes, whispering against marble metals, winking. Murmurs rippled outward, names, guest ranks, misread certainty faltering. Jonathan Reeves's gaze found mine without searching. He bypassed the bride and groom as if a map had told him the only destination that mattered. I felt the weight of the honored guest card in my clutch, waiting for the moment it had been borrowed from fate to serve. He halted at conversational distance and saluted, wrist straight angle, precise eyes locked. "An honor to see you here. Senior Defense Strategy Advisor Donovan." The title fell cleanly, no flourish, only the gravity of fact. Somewhere behind me, a fork chimed against crystal, the sound thin and stunned. Richard's sip turned into a sputter. Red wine spotted his cuff. He dabbed at it, then forgot, frozen between manners and disbelief. Emily's smile collapsed into a small O. Guests who had leaned back to laugh now leaned forward to see spines lengthening, hands folding, the posture of classrooms and briefings and other places where truth has the microphone. I returned the salute crisp, letting the room settle around the gesture. Mark near the florals relaxed half a step. His phone disappeared into his pocket as if a circuit had closed. Weeks of caution threaded through my ribs and loosened. The camera drifted closer, and I let it, if the night demanded a record, then let it include this. Reeves shifted to warmth that never bled into casual. He spoke of schedules that had overlapped, of a Navy ball in town, of the convenience of geography. He did not say the word coordination, yet it hung there, understood by anyone who noticed the quiet timing of things. He thanked the couple for allowing a brief interruption, then redirected the attention he had borrowed back to me with a practiced economy of motion. The room recalibrated itself around that economy. Conversations stalled mid-gossip and reassembled as witness. Richard attempted a laugh that didn't arrive. The sound died somewhere between throat and pride. I held his gaze for one beat. No triumph, only a ledger closing on a long, inaccurate account, then returned to Reeves, who understood that sometimes dignity is best demonstrated by not explaining it. The MC shuffled papers that suddenly seemed written for another event. Michael's stance changed by degrees into formal respect shoulders, answering a training older than the suit on his back. His eyes moved from Reeves to me and back, connecting lines as if a chart had clarified under good light. The scent of candle roses mingled with tannin and sea, a strange, sharp perfume of ceremony and shock. "Thank you for accommodating us," Reeves said to the room at large, then let a beat of silence acknowledge the pivot underway. Somewhere a guest began to clap and then stopped, unsure of the cue. It didn't matter. The cue had already been given. Reeves turns to Michael Captain Harris. "I didn't know you were marrying her, sister." The MC clutches his cue cards, frozen. "You've married into one of the most brilliant minds in U.S. defense strategy." Reeves's words pinned the room, still each syllable a nail. Michael's eyes met mine. Puzzle solved. The ballroom brightened as if the chandeliers had leaned closer to listen. The slideshow for cake cutting hovered on the screen, first kiss photos peeking from a paused frame, yet Reeves's voice held the room, not the images. The mic carried no tremor. He explained in plain terms and careful omissions how a convoy had wandered too close to a shoal of hostile sensors and minefields, how weather current and signal discipline had narrowed options to a blade's width. He said my plan found the blade. Not a classified brief, only the scaffolding of a night that had been hard and moonless and very far from this glittering hall. Around us, chairs creaked as posture shifted from casual to attentive. I felt the honored guest card press into my palm through the silk of my clutch, a small square heartbeat. Emily stood very still in her gown, the kind of stillness that announces a spotlight has moved. Somewhere near the bar, a guest whispered, "Is she?" and did not finish the sentence. Reeves kept it brisk, sparing everyone jargon, never once saying my name when he could say she, letting the pronoun pick up weight all on its own. He described the pattern of decoys we'd lured, the corridor of safety built out of timing, and feints, the quiet hour when a fleet moves, because a pencil line on a map said it could. People who had laughed earlier now gripped their glasses with two hands. I stood a half step back from the microphone, not to be coy, but because I preferred the truth to arrive uncluttered. Richard cut in, voice pitched bright. She was just a small advisor. The syllables tried for lightness and landed like ice in water. Reeves turned the warmth in his face unaltered and asked, clear enough for the back row, a small advisor whose report was signed by the president. The question hung long enough to be an answer. Richard's smile trembled, then retreated behind his glass. I let my earlier words to Emily slide back into my mind. I already serve in one, and felt them lock into place inside the narrative Reeves shaped. Michael's shoulders squared in that unconscious response soldiers have when formality fits the moment. He wasn't wearing a uniform, but the years still lived in his bones. The best man, who had been poised for a joke, shut his mouth gently as if he had remembered a different script. Whispers thinned. The room's temperature found a new level cooler cleaner. I watched the camera operator recalibrate zoom, easing from the easy spectacle of a wedding to the rarely captured expression of a crowd learning it had been wrong. Reeves did not elaborate on after-action citations, did not flex medals or chain of command. He left just enough detail to prove the thing had happened, and just enough restraint to keep us all on the safe side of secrecy. His restraint did the boasting for him, for me, for anyone who recognized what careful speech protects. He closed the loop with a soft gravity, stepping back from the mic as if returning borrowed air. People like her are why we sleep at night. Applause broke the tension. It started scattered, two hands in a corner, then a row along the wall, then a wave that found its own rhythm and filled the glass and gold room. I didn't bow. I didn't gesture for more. I let the sound move past me to where it belonged, toward the idea that competence can be quiet and still be the loudest thing in a room. Michael steps forward, salutes, "Ma'am." "It's an honor to officially call you family." The mic is in my hands. Michael's "ma'am" echoed through the mic, pulling me back to the first time I heard it in the Pentagon corridor, boots clicking in sync. The spotlight rested on my shoulders, a warmth that contrasted with the cool steadiness settling in my chest. Below, Richard sat at the center table, jaw-tight eyes locked on the glass in front of him as if it could shield him from the moment's weight. I let the silence stretch, not as a pause, but as terrain space I owned. Dad. I began, voice measured enough to cut through the rustle of fabric and breath. You once said I needed someone kind to take care of me. I've been helping take care of an entire country. A few heads turned toward him. His fingers traced the rim of his wineglass without lifting it. The MC, sensing the shift, cued the screen. Slides bloomed into the Light Department of Defense, images me at a Pentagon podium flanked by generals seated across from foreign envoys, briefing a room where the walls seemed to hum with classified weight. The room murmured in short bursts. Phones rose, framing me, capturing evidence that needed no embellishment. I stepped forward, each heel strike a metronome down the short stairs into the field of tables. My hand opened and the reserved, honored guest card, once a misdelivery, lay balanced between my fingers. I stopped at Richard's chair. For a moment, I simply looked at him, letting the proximity make the air taut. Then I placed the card on the linen before him, centered over his untouched plate. It landed with the faintest thud, but the silence it summoned was heavy. His eyes dropped to the card, tracing the printed words, and whatever he meant to say dissolved before it reached his mouth. The pause expanded unbroken until the room seemed to be listening for something more than sound. From the back corner, a single clap rang out, sharp, unhurried. Another followed, then another, until the rhythm caught. Chairs scraped. People rose, the applause building in slow, deliberate waves, rolling forward like surf under a full moon. I didn't bow or wave. I only turned toward the glass wall, toward the ocean beyond it, the black water carrying the sound outward where no one could claim it back. The sea air was cold on the terrace, carrying salt and the muffled crash of waves. I breathed in freedom. Warm lamplight gathered in shallow pools across the weathered board's moths, wheeling through it like drifting ash. Inside, applause still pulsed against the glass, softened now to a heartbeat. Out here, the moon picked a path across the Atlantic and left it trembling. I leaned on the rail and let the cold find my lungs, letting the night settle into a quieter shape than victory. The kitchen table seat from earlier flashed in my mind, steam from the swinging doors, the draft on my ankles, the choreography of plates and apologies. Now I stood where I chose, not tucked anywhere, not sidelined by someone else's idea of comfort. My shoulders loosened in increments I hadn't known were clenched. Footsteps approached together. Michael, first hand extended. Emily, half a step behind Bouquet, lowered like a flag after ceremony. His shake was firm, unshowy. "Thank you," he said, voice pitched low enough not to break the quiet. Emily's eyes flicked up, then away, then back, courage assembling. "I'm sorry," she murmured, each word heavier than the last. "I thought I was helping. I wasn't." She worried the ribbon on her bouquet until it stilled and added softer, "I didn't know." I nodded once. "Now you do." Michael said he would tell her the whole of it, not the headlines, the nights, the trade-offs, the math that doesn't make press releases. Emily listened, chin tucked, the point of her shoe tracing a nervous half-moon on the plank before stopping. When she looked up again, the brightness she wore inside had shifted from spotlight to lamp. Glasses chimed. Reeves stepped into the halo of a terrace light, the officers behind him already turning toward the stairs. He raised his glass a fraction. Next time, he said, the hint of a smile easing the formality. "Don't let them write the story for you." Then he tipped the glass toward the ocean, toward the city beyond it, toward everything that waits when the music ends, and withdrew with the quiet efficiency of people who are always on their way to somewhere else. Richard did not come out. Through the glass, I caught a brief reflection of him at the center table, head bowed over the place card as if it contained instructions he could not decipher. A server crossed between us, and he was gone from view. On the table beside me, the reserved, honored guest card lay like a spent shell. I set it flat, pressed a fingertip to its edge, and let the wind take it. It skittered, lifted, and sailed into the night, a pale rectangle briefly lit against the moon before the dark folded around it. The sea filled the silence he left. The lights inside dimmed a notch. Laughter resumed in a different register. I drew the salt air deeper, felt the event inside me shrink to scale important, and also not the biggest thing I would ever face. Boots on tile in a long corridor came back to me, the rhythm of work that doesn't end, because a room finally learned my name. Somewhere offshore, a buoy rang. Phone buzzes. Washington needs you Monday. Situation Pacific. I smile. The game is never over. Beneath the hum of fading music, the night closed on a victory measured not in applause, but in the quiet certainty that truth had reclaimed its ground. The ones who once dismissed her now carried the weight of their own misjudgment, while the shadows that had thrived on doubt dissolved under the light of proof. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. Sometimes a single deliberate stand is enough to turn a long defeat into an enduring triumph. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth.